That's Deputy Director General of the GES, Anthony Boateng, speaking to Mama Viewusa Boache earlier on the AM show. But joining us now is Kofi Asare. He's Executive Director of Africa Education Watch. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Asare. The reasons given by the Deputy Director General of the GES sound very convincing. What exactly is the issue with it?
Well, good morning and good morning to your cherished viewers. Stakeholders have raised concern about the lack of consultation. Well, we haven't, but we observe that teacher unions are very critical in this process, and they have been sidelined. And this is not the first time they have been sidelined. You know, in many critical decisions at this level, they are sidelined. And I'm surprised that the GES Deputy Director General feels that sidelining teacher unions in taking decisions relating to the reopening of schools is the best practice at this point. Anyway.
But did he say it's the best practice? I'm not sure he said that. Are you deducing, or you heard?
He didn't express any regrets. He didn't express any regrets, and it's not the first. And so, if they think that they have the mandate to provide education services, and so they determine how to go about it, that's fine.
Okay. So, Mr. Asare, let me just find out from you. So you've raised concerns about the lack of consultation, but the decision in itself and the reasons we just heard, are they bad?
Well, the first is that the first reason he gave is quite buzzing. We will probably need to interpret it further. I'm not saying that I don't agree with him, but what I want to say is that if on the basis of the principle of physical contacts per WHO, children in lower primary cannot go to school because their curriculum involves that learning takes place through play and interaction. You all know that. If on the basis of his submission, then we cannot conveniently say that until COVID is over, until there are vaccines for all children, we cannot reopen the lower primary, from lower primary to early childhood. That is clear per the submission he made. And that I think that is interesting, and we will have to later have a discussion on that. But on the issue of reopening schools for only Form 2, perhaps if there was consultation, they would have realized that it was possible to reopen perhaps the entire educational system for 2 weeks. For 2 months, compressed from third term. Because as is happening in Sierra Leone now, they are in school. We opened school before Sierra Leone opened school for the finalists, but they are in school. They've opened the entire cohort and they are doing a compressed term. There are two options. Either you open school for the third term, have a compressed third term to atone for the learning loss due to the long closure, or you in the academic year and move to the next January and then have a new academic year.
So perhaps
fused in a way into the first term.
Okay.
You understand?
Okay.
So the two of then because only they know why they took the decision, it is very difficult for us to explain why. We can only explain the effect, and the effect of the decision is that as students stay home for a long period, the learning loss extends, especially for students in about 20% of Ghana where there's no electricity, about 5 million households. Children there cannot access the Ghana Learning TV.
Okay.
And so their colleagues do so in urban areas. We widen the gap, in learning loss. Apart from that, our research also indicated that about 20% of the schools we sampled, it recorded issues of girls not returning to school. I'm talking about junior high school 3 and senior high school 3. And the reason 78% was pregnancy and the remaining was marriage. Point I want to make is that there's evidence from Sierra Leone and Liberia that prolonged school closures will lead to about 22% of people not returning to school, especially girls. And so we need to take into cognizance the social impact and then also the direct education impact of long school closures, and how we can all work together to mitigate the likely consequences of these closures. The media has a role to play, CFOs have a role to play, and then the GES. We need to be engaging the girls at home with more content that will enhance their moral behavior and also make them more assertive when it comes to sex education, so that they can resist sexual violence and not participate in activities likely to make them pregnant, because that seems to be the key issue for girls' re-entry. whilst we roll out e-learning interventions to bridge the learning loss. For the rural areas, it's unfortunate there's very little we can do because the radio lessons going on is not too effective. I'm just coming from a tour of virtually about 30 communities, not effective. But we can only manage with the TV for those who can access them and hope that schools reopen, in January.
Let me take you back to your submission about compressed terms for all the students. Is that not possible when they return in January? Because definitely some of them, like you're saying, will still struggle to exhaust their curriculum. So can we do that when they return in January to compress and combine what they couldn't study during the lockdown or during the school shutdown period to what they would have to study for the next term?
Yeah. That is possible. That is what countries like Nigeria are doing. They are also planning to start the academic year. Some of the states, of course, are planning to start the academic year in January. Any country planning to start the academic year in January virtually is saying that in the first term of that academic year, if I were in class 4, I'm now going to class 5, I would do some class 4 third term stuff in the first term of class 5 because of the learning loss. And so definitely you have a semblance of the third term which we lost and half of the second term which we lost in the previous academic year fused into the new academic year so that we will have an extended one. So the issue is not about not atoning for the learning loss. You definitely atone for it. But the issue is about why couldn't we have reopened schools in phases in October, November, December, after WASI and BEC has ended. Why couldn't we have done that? Now, rather opening for junior high school students. And we are making the point that we don't know why the decision was taken, but we can only infer about the consequences, the positive and then the negative. The positive consequence actually is that it will afford government an opportunity to study the current second wave of infections spreading across many countries and see how the second wave of infections may or may not affect Ghana. And so it's much better for you to hasten in reopening schools with just a little cohort, JSS2, SS2, to test it and see how the second wave will affect Ghana. Probably that's the only benefit I see by this approach. Other than that, I think that we could have engaged the teacher unions, especially in the private schools, on the possibility of having one or two more cohorts join this cohort in reopening schools in batches. At least having 4 hours a day for morning shift, 4 hours a day for afternoon shift alone would have been so important, especially for rural schools, without electricity, without e-learning content, who need to catch up with their colleagues in urban areas. If our system was devolved, like systems in other federal countries, like federal states like China, and in other countries like in Tonga, and in other countries where we have municipalities opening schools, we could have had Bongo districts decide to reopen their schools because they know that in their districts, very few communities have electricity.
All right.
So that they would raise classes for their students. But unfortunately, our system is heavily centralized, not yet decentralized, and so we don't have the luxury of municipalities taking decisions to reopen schools.
Thank you very much, Mr. Asare. Kofi Asare is Executive Director of Africa Education Watch, and we've been talking about government's directive to reopen schools and the concerns that there wasn't much consultation before that decision was arrived at.